In the year 2000 and something, in the beautiful city of Seoul, which, like many great metropolises, remained always illuminated, the city buzzed with constant life and movement. In Gangnam-gu, within the Yeoksamdong district, a highly connected area stood out. Both day and night, the hustle and bustle never ceased, showcasing the region's relentless energy. At the top of a building owned by the D Group, on a reserved floor, there was a very special place. There lived the person who held the #1 position in the global online gaming rankings, a player whose skill was widely recognized. In this environment, where everything revolved around the mouse, keyboard, and screen, there was a room dedicated exclusively to training professional players, a true arena of virtual competition. It was precisely in this space that the world's most skilled player was seeking his next challenge. Dex, the legendary knight. The group known as D1 entered the Valley of War, the game scenario, determined to face the famous knight Dex, who seemed to be a legend. Roar, one of the team's members, was the first to spot Dex. At first, he believed the knight was standing still on purpose, as if to intimidate his opponents with a confident stance. Full of determination, Roar thought his team could demonstrate why they were considered the best players in the world. He advanced toward the knight, who remained motionless. However, what seemed to be a passive stance turned out to be a trap. Dex, with a swift and precise move, wielded his sword and completely disarmed the opponent, leaving everyone astonished. The rest of the team watched in disbelief as Roar was defeated. They tried to advance to help him and understand what was happening, but they quickly realized that Dex was far ahead in terms of skill. With an impeccable combo, Dex took down every member of the team, proving his skill was worthy of the first place ranking. Even the strongest members, like the Tank and the Reaper, were defeated with a single blow. This made it clear that Dex was on another level. Still, the group believed that, with a good strategy, they could win. They decided to maintain their formation, but Dex, with his relentless determination, advanced with such force that resistance became impossible. When the match ended, the world's #1 player realized he had been completely defeated. Dex now occupied the top spot in the rankings, reigning supreme over the opponents left behind. Meanwhile, the player who previously held the #1 position couldn't believe what had happened. Defeat was something he never expected to face. In another place, the player known as Dex reflected on his journey. For him, the names used in games weren't important. His goal was always to reach the top, regardless of the nickname he used. With that in mind, he deleted the character Dex, deciding it was time to move on. His next goal would be even greater, and he was ready to face it. Besides gaming, the protagonist also enjoyed savoring his fries. Looking at the container where he kept his snacks, he noticed they were gone. He deeply pondered whether he should go out to buy more, since he had already accomplished his main goal of the day, and become the #1 player in the rankings. That goal was just another task on his extensive to-do list for the day, and having completed it, he decided to send a message. The former #1 in the online gaming rankings, who once reigned supreme, wasn't happy at all to realize his position had been surpassed by another player. He felt so upset and frustrated that he began trembling and talking to himself. He believed Dex had been bold and cunning to the end to claim the top spot. He also pondered deeply about who this mysterious troll really was. Not only had Dex reached the ranking, but he also sent a message announcing his departure from the game. This was exactly what happened on the day Dex made his public announcement, that he was leaving the game, and the news quickly spread throughout the gaming community. Delivery drivers in an Arcadia truck chatted excitedly about the recent feat, and how that troll had proven to be truly magnificent in his actions. As the delivery truck headed to a specific address, the drivers inside the vehicle discussed online players and their recent activities. They talked about how, little by little, many were leaving the games and debated the reasons behind their decisions. Arcadia Online was everywhere, establishing itself as one of the corporations leading the world of electronics and entertainment technologies. Along with the Argos Corporation and Sillicoff, they formed an ultra-secret collaboration among these three influential companies. These corporations were responsible not only for producing advanced computers, but also for creating the first virtual world available on the market. In this virtual world, someone could easily log in through a revolutionary machine known as the Dreamer, offering an immersive experience. The marketing of these companies aimed to reach a broad audience, asserting that there was a place full of diverse possibilities and adventures waiting for them. For those feeling tired of the mundane life they were currently leading, Arcadia Online awaited with a tempting invitation for a fresh start. And this was exactly what the delivery drivers in the truck were excitedly discussing as they made their way to the last delivery of the day. Upon arriving at the final address, they noticed that the house did not seem to match the high value of such advanced technological equipment. Although it appeared to be a simple residence in poor external condition, inside it was someone extremely anxious and excited. This person had finally received the device they had been eagerly awaiting, signaling the beginning of a new journey for them. The name at the address was Jaeyeong, a 20-year-old young man known for his enthusiasm for online games. At that moment, the protagonist was deleting the character Dex, as he had decided to leave traditional games behind from that day forward. He would dedicate himself entirely to Dreamer, so he entered the required password and logged in to begin his new experience in the virtual world. He would enter a new world that wasn't just a game but a fully immersive virtual reality where anything was possible. And upon seeing everything from above, he found the place absolutely stunning. At first, he felt completely enchanted and captivated by Arcadia, ready to explore all its wonders and challenges. The developers had always enjoyed hiding surprises in the games, from small jokes to astonishing tricks. The greatest of these tricks was a discovery that greatly empowered the players who managed to find it. This feat was called Hidden Pieces. Within the game, someone was relying on Alice to deliver these secret pieces. Alice was also part of the game world and had the task of passing everything on to the next generation wanderer. The Dreamer operated innovatively, connecting directly to the brain and digitizing people's senses. The player had heard of this technology before, but upon seeing it with his own eyes, he realized everything was real. In the virtual environment, he could observe how people moved and interacted. There were even vendors selling goods or bartering items. When someone offered the protagonist a piece of iron ore, he became curious but didn't know exactly what it was for. As he walked through the alleys and explored the place, he also checked his status window. The registered name was Dex, and he was still at level 1, equipped with basic items like a sword, armor, and boots. He found it interesting how everything seemed simpler than he had imagined, believing he would quickly complete his initial mission. Dex knew it was challenging to perform precise movements in Arcadia. For this reason, there were special skills to facilitate actions like dashes, dodges, and precise strikes. Certainly, there were players who demonstrated skills far superior to others. The protagonist, for example, showed great dexterity by completing his first mission with immense ease. Understanding the initial task was so simple that he quickly moved on to the next stage. Confident, he believed he would finish the new mission in no time, but upon reading the details, he lost enthusiasm. This time, the task seemed more discouraging. He had to read 100 books, which he didn't consider a worthy mission. Even so, Dex headed to Edelin's public library to begin the task. At the library, he found two girls conversing about their views and perceptions of that world. As they observed the young man from a distance, they noticed that all he had done in the past 2 days was read. The girl with violet hair questioned her pink-haired friend, stating that it was natural for him to be reading since they were in a library. However, the pink-haired girl defended a different theory, explaining that not everyone who appeared there was genuinely interested in reading. Meanwhile, the protagonist considered abandoning everything and running away, as the reading wasn't captivating enough. The girl with violet hair also believed he would quickly give up on everything. However, the librarian was surprised to see the young man approaching her, asking for the continuation of a book. Even then, she thought he must be joking, as it didn't seem possible that he had actually read the first volume. Dex explained to the librarian that the initial book contained some very interesting parts, which led him to believe there must be a continuation. He made it clear that he had read the work and mentioned that it was titled The History of Arcadia, Part 1. Upon hearing this, something special was triggered in Edelin's oldest feature, and Aline contacted the librarian. Because of this contact, the librarian handed the second volume to the young man, saying he could read it as much as he liked but couldn't take it out of the library. The fact that the second book was kept separately from the first left the protagonist intrigued. The librarian, noticing the doubt, explained that the book was special and only appeared when specifically requested. Dex observed the book for a few moments, reflecting, before deciding to place it in his hands, ready to continue his journey of discoveries. The book was filled with accounts and events, beginning with the village of Edelin, where a special circumstance had been detected. On a secret mission, the player was informed that they had been selected for an exam. It was explained that, in the past, there was a legendary adventurer who hid a treasure in the lake near the starting village of Edelin. In truth, all that remained about that treasure were speculations, as no one had ever found anything concrete. The only certainty was that the treasure was referred to as the oldest remnant of darkness. It was also said that the legendary adventurer, Ezreal, had hidden the treasure near the lake in Edelin. Since no one had ever found the remnant of darkness, the treasure eventually became just a forgotten legend. The protagonist, intrigued, noticed in the book a map showing Lake Arun, suggesting it could be the only one in the village. Determined to complete the mission and uncover the truth, the player set off south of Edelin village toward Lake Arun. Upon arriving at the location, driven by sheer curiosity, he couldn't imagine that the ancient darkness might actually be present. To his satisfaction, the status window confirmed that the final condition for the mission's activation had been fulfilled. Dex, now ranked number 1, saw that a new mission had been generated for him. The protagonist was tasked with searching for remnants of darkness, determining if the legend was true, and finding those traces. With all this, it seemed hard for the player to believe that there were B-rank missions in a newly launched game. Satisfied, he thought that even high-level attack missions should be rank C, which made everything even more exciting. However, if he really wanted to, he could attempt to find the ancient darkness at the bottom of the lake. Even walking through the forest, nothing seemed truly special, which made the environment even more mysterious and intriguing. Looking around, he wondered if something might be hidden beneath. The only way to find out was by diving to investigate. With determination, he rolled up his shirt sleeves and positioned himself at the edge of the platform, diving directly into the lake. As he hit the water, he realized that the small lake was surprisingly deep, something he hadn't expected. Just ahead, he saw what appeared to be a vast, dark tunnel, sparking even more curiosity. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, technicians were discussing events related to the main scenario that had been activated. This was happening at the Korean branch of a major gaming company. The local administrator sought to understand how a new mission had been opened in that location, especially considering this had occurred less than a week after the game's launch. They informed him that one of the players had found elements directly tied to the main scenario, triggering the new events. With this, he ordered all departments to prepare efficiently to respond in case of any emergencies. It was hard to imagine problems arising so soon, as the game had been launched only 4 days ago. Meanwhile, in the lake, the main scenario seemed to brew, an increasing darkness as the protagonist advanced further into his dive. He gained new diving skills that allowed him to go deeper, inching closer to the mission's objective. Even on solid ground, he calculated that he had already dived more than 200 meters, yet he still couldn't see the bottom. He considered the possibility of giving up but reminded himself that the game was new, and many players were pushing themselves to gain advantages. Being there, wasting time while others increased their scores, made him anxious. Additionally, there was the monthly cost of the immersion capsule, a piece of equipment costing 9,000 won per month. He hoped to cover this expense using items obtained in the game, but knew it would be nearly impossible to gather that much money at this early stage. His frustration was evident, but everything changed when a new mission appeared, and it was secret and exclusive. This mission, unlike those created for other players, seemed to be a unique and exciting opportunity. He pondered what he would do if the reward turned out to be disappointing but couldn't resist trying, knowing it was an incredible chance to advance in the game. Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, United States, at the company's headquarters, Jenica Paul, the company's president, was at the center of the developments. At just 15 years old, with shining blonde hair, she had turned her bedroom into an improvised office. She was talking to Jack via video conference, discussing the newly activated main scenario in Korea. Jack reported that a Korean player had found a clue related to a secret class, which triggered all the recent events. The young president considered it reckless to leave such important information in a starting village, something that didn't make sense to her. Jack, in turn, explained that it hadn't been their idea, saying so with a wide grin, as if he found the situation amusing. He emphasized that it was all the work of a specific person, someone not yet clearly introduced into the storyline. However, this person was well known to both Jenica and Jack. Upon hearing this, the teenager felt a surge of indignation. She grabbed her tablet, which was on a nearby piece of furniture, and saw that the information about the player had just arrived. The player in question had the secret class, Bard of Anarchy. Despite this, Jenica noticed that he seemed devoid of skills and had very little attack power. Still, one detail caught her attention. He had a special skill, something rare and surprising. Jenica was so impacted that she stared intensely at the tablet, rolling her eyes as she reflected on the situation. A scream of anger and frustration echoed through the room as she expressed her discontent with what was happening. Meanwhile, in Arcadia, 10 days had passed since Dex began exploring the lake in search of ways to complete his mission. When he finally emerged from the water with a necklace, a key piece of his task, he felt satisfied, despite soaking everything around him. Dex admired the necklace, realizing that his diving skills had improved significantly, raising his rank and increasing his stamina. The status indicators displayed the improvements he had achieved, showing growing familiarity with aquatic attributes and notable progress in his stats. In the status window, a message also appeared stating that his mission, related to the search for traces of darkness, had been completed. However, Dex realized that the black necklace was more than just a part of his mission. It contained an additional clue, which left him intrigued. The question arose, should he wear the necklace or not, considering that the information provided seemed more like a warning than an encouragement. As he pondered, a status window appeared, asking if he wanted to wear the necklace, offering the options yes or no. Without hesitation, Dex chose yes. However, he found it strange when the status bar began repeatedly asking the same question. Even after selecting yes several times, the question continued to reappear in the status window. It kept asking if he was absolutely sure he wanted to wear the necklace, warning that this would be the last opportunity to change his mind. The situation reached a point where Dex lost patience, becoming irritated and firmly declaring that he wanted to wear the necklace. However, even with his insistence, the status screen persisted, asking again if he was sure of his decision. Suddenly, a voice began interacting with him, stating that he had already been given enough chances to think carefully before choosing to wear the necklace. The voice also warned him not to regret it, and suggested that he should fully dedicate himself to creating chaos from that moment onward, something that seemed to align with his actions. Dex looked up, trying to identify the source of the mysterious voice, and noticed a blue light shining in the sky. It was from there that the words, which spoke directly to him, were emanating, provoking a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Shortly after, the status window displayed an update. His secret class was recognized, and his title changed to Cry of Anarchy. However, this transformation came at a high cost. His level system was completely deleted, replaced by a skill called plausibility. In addition, a new mission was added to the system, and the connection between the character and the player became permanent and irrevocable. This new mission left Dex completely alarmed, as he realized that all his points had disappeared without explanation. The imposed task was to eliminate a beginner player who had not yet changed their title. The mission had a limited time frame of only 6 days. In the vast plains west of Edelin, in the well-known beginner's hunting ground inhabited by slimes, a group of hunters had gathered. With enthusiasm, they pursued the slimes, aiming to eliminate them and accumulate valuable points to level up in their journeys. In the midst of the hunt, one of the slimes was knocked out and flung away. After being defeated, it dropped a special item. The hunter, noticing that he had acquired a rare slime bubble drop, was visibly pleased. He cheerfully commented that the item had a market value of 50 bronze coins, which made his partner share in his happiness, celebrating the achievement alongside him. What the two didn't know was that they were being watched by someone hidden behind a tree. Still, they continued their celebration, thrilled with the rare item they had obtained. The player observing them closely was Dex, the protagonist, who was reflecting on the mission he had been given. His task was to eliminate beginners before they had a chance to evolve. This doubt had been bothering him ever since. An hour earlier, the system notified him that he could not delete his character, despite multiple frustrated attempts. Dex was visibly upset, feeling like someone who had just stepped into a trap. The inability to delete the character left him in a constant state of discomfort. It all began when he was assigned to a hidden class, accompanied by several alert windows. In his frustration, he tried to delete the character immediately. The reason was simple: he had no levels. After staring at the status window for a long time, he noticed that his nickname, Dex, indicated he was part of the Cry of Anarchy. He also realized that his progression did not appear in the status window. His character, unlike others, had no leveling system. Since a player's basic system is level progression, for Dex, this meant he had no way to grow. Although at that moment it didn't seem to make a difference, he knew that as other players leveled up, the gap between them would grow infinitely, making it impossible to keep up. Dex recalled the enigmatic words of the voice, which encouraged him to do his best to ruin things. That memory made him even more uneasy. Frustrated, he thought he should have abandoned everything the moment he heard that absurd conversation. He lay on the soft green grass, looking up at the blue sky above, trying to organize his thoughts. He knew that nothing would change if he just stayed there, taking no action. He had a hidden class, the Cry of Anarchy. Although it was a frustrating situation, it was still a class with potential. Dex told himself with determination that the class would be useful somehow, even though everything seemed discouraging at the moment. Looking at the sky, it seemed as if he wanted to grasp it with his hands, a gesture of hope and stubbornness. After that, Dex spent a long time observing the system window, trying to find any useful information. That's when he noticed the word plausibility. Although it was still marked as 0, the term piqued his curiosity. He wanted to understand what it meant. The description indicated that this ability increased the influence he could exert on the world around him. It allowed him to manipulate relevant statistics to artificially alter certain rules. However, he had no idea what all of it really meant. It seemed too complicated to understand. No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't decipher what it practically implied. In addition, the new mission he received left him perplexed. He could barely believe a mission like that could exist. His task was to eliminate beginners who had not yet undergone significant changes in the game. For that reason, he was hiding behind a tree, carefully observing the hunters on the battlefield. From that spot, Dex could clearly see the players' satisfaction as they celebrated the rare drop they had obtained. Still uncertain, he pondered whether he should really complete the mission or just observe and let the beginners continue their journey. After thinking for a while, he decided to try completing the mission before considering giving up. Gripping his sword firmly, he mustered his courage. He looked up at the sky, as if seeking an answer, and affirmed to himself that he couldn't ignore a mission that had already been assigned. Additionally, he reminded himself that he was also a player in the game, and should act accordingly. Determined, he began walking toward the two players he was observing. But before Dex reached them, someone else appeared, claiming he could have eliminated them with just one strike. It was a blond man with long hair, accompanied by two companions, holding a dagger in his hand. He declared himself the owner of the hunting spot and demanded to know who had given them permission to hunt there. Dex, observing from a distance, found it strange for someone to claim an area in such an open game. The girl accompanying the man was outraged to hear him assert that the beginner's hunting ground belonged to him. She made it clear that it was a public space where anyone could hunt without needing permission. The man, who was at level 12 and called himself Crazy Monkey, responded mockingly, saying he could tell from her accent that she was from Seoul. The girl's companion, still on the ground, noticed something alarming. The man's name was marked in crimson above his head. He knew what it meant. That player was a PK, someone who attacked other players. Meanwhile, Crazy Monkey continued taunting the girl, claiming he could find out where she lived just from her nickname. The three players warned the couple that it would be better to leave if they didn't want something worse to happen. The young woman, distressed, looked around, searching for help from other players, hoping someone would intervene to save them. However, no one seemed willing to intervene in the chaos, leaving her feeling even more helpless. Even so, the young man decided to confront the malicious players, questioning why they were acting so cruelly. He argued that everyone should remember it was just a game, where the goal was to have fun and earn points. Hearing this, Mad Monkey and his team burst into laughter, finding it hilarious that the young man was trying to be so serious in a game. However, the young man did not appreciate being ridiculed. Even so, Mad Monkey continued, explaining that since it was a virtual reality, it was the perfect place to do whatever they wanted. He mocked further, saying that the world always worked this way, the strong ruled, and the weak had to submit. Dex was listening to everything and, in some ways, agreed with what Mad Monkey had said. That's why he decided to remove him from the game. He started by attacking one of the opposing team members. After that, he moved on to the others, stating that he unfortunately needed to end it. With his mastery of skills, Dex managed to eliminate them all with just one strike each. Removing those players from the match wasn't difficult for him, as being eliminated was all it took to exit the game. Thus, Dex removed the 3 players from the match and noticed that his plausibility increased by 1 point for each player eliminated. Now, he had also become a PK player, with his name displayed in crimson above his head. Upon hearing the status window open, Dex noticed that his plausibility indeed grew every time he removed someone from the game. Even so, he still didn't fully understand how this ability would be useful but decided to accumulate as many points as possible. The 2 players who had previously been threatened thanked Dex for saving them. Dex was straightforward and replied that they didn't need to thank him because, in fact, he would need to eliminate them too. To reassure them, he explained it was simply part of a mission he had received. Before removing them from the game, he said with a smile that they shouldn't be sad because it was just a game. Even so, one of the eliminated players got the impression, upon looking into Dex's eyes, that everything felt frighteningly real. He even thought Dex might be insane, but he didn't have much time to reflect, as he was soon removed from the game. The other players, who had only been watching without intervening, began to realize the situation had taken an unexpected turn. Dex looked directly at them and declared that they would be next since they had just stood by doing nothing. He also warned them not to complain when they were eliminated involuntarily. That day, the hunting field was filled with screams. Soon, a rumor began circulating on Arcadia's main page. Everyone was talking about the same thing, the crazy PK player who had appeared. The protagonist continued his mission late into the night. The moon shone brightly in the sky as he persisted in his hunt. From a tall tree, an owl watched Dex, who wandered through the forest searching for beginner players to complete his task. The beginners ran desperately through the darkness of the early morning, shouting and calling for help, hoping someone would assist them. In the chaos, one of them tripped over a stone and fell. A status window immediately appeared, informing him that his movement speed had been reduced. The player, still on the ground, looked back in fear, trying to confirm if the pursuer was still nearby. To his despair, Dex remained hidden in the darkness, among the trees, closely observing his prey. Dex wasn't eliminating other players out of malice but because the game's mission forced him to. However, the beginners had no idea of the burden he carried. When he found the fallen player, Dex approached with the intent of completing the mission and eliminating him. The beginner, terrified, begged Dex to stop, arguing that he was only trying to survive and didn't deserve to be hunted down. Dex, with his sword resting on his shoulder, hesitated for a moment. He paused to listen to what the other player had to say, though he didn't have many choices given the mission he had to complete. The fallen player, with his eyes closed, lamented how the gaming industry seemed ruthless, even in a newly launched game that was supposed to be civilized. Intrigued, Dex lowered his sword slightly to listen more attentively. He responded to the player, saying he didn't understand his words, as he was simply following the rules set by the game. For the beginner, however, it was hard to believe that. The idea of being eliminated by another player seemed absurd and cruel. Even so, Dex removed him from the game, knowing he had to continue his mission and gain more plausibility within that virtual universe. After completing another elimination, Dex stopped for a moment, showing signs of fatigue. He knew the online arcade system included a kind of virtual death penalty. Any eliminated player had to wait 24 hours before being able to return. Although this measure was a strategy to combat addiction, it also aimed to increase player engagement with the game. At the customer service department of Arcade Online, the team was overwhelmed with countless complaints and access requests. The manager didn't understand the reason for the commotion, but the reports were clear. Something unusual was happening. There was talk of a PK that had emerged in the game. Players claimed that a peculiar individual was causing chaos and monopolizing events. To the support team lead, it seemed like the work of someone taking the game to extremes. They had just decided to work overtime in the customer service department because everything was extremely hectic. Meanwhile, in Arcade, Dex continued staring at his status window, still unable to reach any level. His attributes seemed normal, but his plausibility was at 1025. He noticed that for every player defeated, he earned 1 point. He thought the results were satisfying for someone who had gone 2 nights without sleep, even though it was harder than he imagined. Now, he was the target of disdain from everyone he had removed from the game, carrying a strange emotional burden. He questioned whether it was really right to eliminate all those beginners so soon after the game's launch. Even while completing the mission, he still felt there was something very peculiar about it, and there were 6 days and 23 hours left to finish it. Although he didn't agree with the mission, he knew it wasn't his decision to make. He had to comply, just like everyone else. Suddenly, something caught his attention. Looking back, he noticed several slimes. All the slimes seemed tired and sad for some reason, but one approached the protagonist. This particular slime, however, appeared happy and grateful, as it had been saved, and his favorability with the slimes increased. When he realized that all the slimes were about to jump toward him to hug him in gratitude, he felt a bit alarmed. However, the slimes were so soft and thankful that he eventually gave in to their cuteness and gladly accepted their gratitude. He thought to himself how different the slimes were from anything he had encountered so far, despite being so socially isolated. Now, he was happy because at least he had found a place where he belonged, with all the slimes smiling and joyful around him. However, he noticed torches lit in that direction and heard people talking. Since they were far away, he couldn't understand what they were saying. He had to bid farewell to the slimes, knowing that staying there could be dangerous for both himself and the slimes. The beginners who had been removed from the game and forced to spend 24 hours away had returned, determined to hunt Dex. Their leader seemed resolute in finding him. Upon noticing the protagonist running, he immediately alerted the others. He shouted to the group about what he had seen ahead and ordered them to chase the individual to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, the protagonist kept running through the night, trying to shake off the hunters as he weaved between the trees. He saw a beam of light ahead and sped up, aiming to reach that place that might offer an escape. However, upon arriving, he realized it was a cliff and the hunters were watching his movements. The leader, holding a torch, declared that Dex was completely cornered upon seeing him at the cliff's edge. He also warned that it was their turn to remove him from the game, and that he should accept it without resistance. Dex, tired and sleepless for 2 nights, had already planned everything. So, he smiled confidently. Standing right at the edge of the cliff, he simply jumped, knowing that doing so would return him to his capsule. The other players, watching from the top of the cliff, were outraged to see him fall. They had wanted to be the ones to remove him from the game, but he had chosen to disconnect himself. They thought he was some kind of lunatic, but as he fell, Dex just gave a broad smile before logging out. The group of players found the moment so unusual that they decided to record the scene and post it on social media. The protagonist's fall generated a flood of comments, including many from outraged individuals. These comments came mainly from players who had also been removed from the game by Dex during his missions. Another player, while conducting some research, discovered that over 700 cases had been reported. These reports pointed to players who had been victims of the protagonist while he was completing missions in the slime habitat. Because of this, many believed his level wasn't very high, despite his controversial actions. In response, one player decided to gather others who had been removed from the game by the protagonist. It was agreed that everyone would meet in the main square of the arcade game to plan their next steps. The objective of the meeting was to devise a plan to eliminate the troll who had been driving away numerous beginner players. In this context, the players understood that in Arcadia, they could not only create scenarios within the game, but also strengthen their relationships as they interacted more. Additionally, their connection occurred through the internet, and their actions were represented in the game, depending on the AI's will. This artificial intelligence, called Alice, detected the large group gathered in the square and began investigating